What up, my friends? Welcome to the Fathers of Fantasy podcast. This is Donuts with my man Hulk. We're going to be putting together a dope best ball podcast over the duration of the summer. Get you prepared for best ball mania on Underdog Fantasy. Hulk, what's up, my man?
What's going on, brother? Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, sir. We got our coffee. We're ready to rock and roll. Going to show you all what Underdog Fantasy looks like. If it's your first time seeing it, check your pulse. This site, this platform is incredibly popular. It's very fun. And it's basically, if you like fantasy football, you'll love this because it's the best part of all things fantasy, and that's the draft. You basically are drafting a team, and your goal is to hope that your team, based on your draft, scores the most points by the end of the year, and you can win a ton of money. Now, there's a tournament breakdown and there's a regular season breakdown. So you're going to get paid out if you finish in the top two and you start advancing through the playoffs. You'll get your money back. You'll start winning money. You'll win more money, and then you'll win a lot of money. So let's go ahead and go through this real quick. The very standard way to look at best ball is the only thing you're focusing on is the draft. You don't need to worry about season. You don't need to worry about waivers, nothing. You draft your team and you're done. It's an 18-round draft, so you're filling your roster with 18 total picks. You can do 30 seconds per pick or 8 hours per pick. Today, we're going to show you what 30 seconds per pick looks like. Scoring is a very standard half point per reception league where each catch is worth a half a point. Everything else, decimal scoring. Very standard scoring right there. Everybody knows what that looks like. Your roster is as follows. Let's say David and Mitch, okay, that's your host here for the show, are both quarterbacks in the NFL, both drafted to your team. And David scores 37 fantasy points in week one. I score 36.8. And while I had a great week, what the system will do is take David's 37 and plug him in as the QB1. That means I'm sitting on the bench. My 36.8 points does not go towards your scoring. It would just be David's score. So on and so forth for each position until your entire roster is filled out each and every week. You don't need to worry about injuries. You don't need to worry about starting and sitting people. It's just the best two scoring running backs on your team will be thrust into your starting lineup each and every week, up and down the roster. Now, there are a ton of different strategies that you can use when drafting for best ball. And we're going to be discussing some of those today and throughout the summer. And we're going to keep you up to date with all things best ball and really what the popular ways are to play. So I've got 30 seconds per pick. I'll bring up David and I here on the screen for you. All right, so David is going to go over the draft lobby for us, kind of talk to us how it looks and, different things you can use. He'll also talk about the board, how it looks in the draft itself. We'll go ahead and look at that when it's live. There are multiple views you can check out. David, since you've done so many drafts this season, and this will be my very first one of the year, go ahead and let it rip, my man.
Yeah, so at the top of the screen, you'll see the draft position. You'll get more information as soon as that's filled. It'll give you round you're in and then overall ADP of or where you are, your draft position at the time. Underneath that is where all the player rankings are. So they are color-coded. Quarterbacks are purple, running backs green, wide receivers, I believe, are orange, and then tight ends are blue. So they make it as easy as possible for players to stand out. So if you're looking for someone there, you could even look for the color and then it'll help you find the name. You can sort by position. If you add anybody to your queue, it will add them on the right side over there. You just star the person. You click the star button next to the person's name. It'll add them over to the right-hand side. It has the rankings there. It has their bye weeks. Everything you need is on this page, really. And then once we get drafting, we'll show you the grid format, which is good for, I found that it's helpful for later rounds, like third, fourth, fifth round is where it really becomes the place to be for your draft for much of the time. It has stats in there from previous years. It goes back 2 years, or 3 years, I'm sorry. It'll have the last 3 years in there. It'll have little notes about the players underneath it.
Yeah, and David, you mentioned one thing about the stats being 3 years. Why that's important? They have this third year here and it shows 0, 0, 0, 0, and everyone's thinking, well, that's silly. Why they show this? Because once the season starts, the best ball experience does not end. You can actually do week to week best ball, which is a blast. Basically, you get to do a fantasy draft for week 2, a fantasy draft for week 3, and they have prize packages for those specific weeks. So, I mean, you could see right now, I'm clicking MLB lobby, and you could do week to week MLB as well. And then each and every day for MLB, they have large tournament prizes, and they'll have this for NFL. Week 2, you had $5 entry. Who knows? It'll be much bigger for NFL, the prize packages, but you can do week to week best ball. It's a blast if you have not experienced this before. I'm excited. We're going to get our first draft in today. We're going to be talking about some strategies for the draft as well. And David, while we're waiting for the room to fill up, that's probably a great opportunity for us to go ahead and discuss some of the things that are like the standard practices that people will do. And, coming from the DFS world, having the mindset of I need to correlate my lineups is great. It's super helpful. Definitely something that people are doing in their day-to-day drafts. But there are more strategies to that focusing on just correlation will not cover. So what are some of the things you know about in regards to scheduling and the playoffs and things like that are really kind of the keys to success based on what the past winners have done in these massive tournaments?
Yeah, so I mean, if you really are trying to win one of these things, which let's face it, that's why we're all here, you really want to be looking at game stacking, really. So I'm going to look ahead to weeks 15, 16, and 17 in the NFL. And it's really hard at this point, but I think we can at least predict some games that we think are going to blow up in those weeks. So looking ahead to weeks 15, 16, 17, I'm going to try to find a couple of games that I want to target as games that will be high scoring, back and forth, and try to get a piece of each side in those games. And if you look ahead to a couple of the weeks, there's a couple of games that stand out like Vikings, Bengals one week, Bills, Chargers, just games like that. If the Chiefs and the Bills were playing, I mean, that's obviously a game we want to target. So just looking ahead and trying to predict a game that might blow up and having a little piece on each side of that game. So it's game stacking. It's trying to predict, ahead of time what teams we think are going to put a ton of points on the board, which is always tough to do. But then there are those teams that every year just you can rely on them to be putting up 30 points a week, and that's what I'd really like to do. Get a piece of the quarterback and wide receivers in those games, and just hope that the game goes nuclear and that pushes me to the next round. And usually teams like that are reliable to do that for a few weeks in a row, and we're just hoping to catch fire at that point, really.
So the draft has told us we're going to start in 40 seconds. Matter of fact, the coolest aspect of this app, and I'm going to hold it up to my screen for you, as you can see a little alert right there, Underdog Fantasy, a little blurry, but it's cool that it shows that Underdog Fantasy draft starts in 60 seconds. So I got an alert on my phone that said, pay attention, dude. Now, if I was on the go and I was dadding it up on the weekend, I could use my cell phone and I could draft from my phone. It's not hard. It's very slick, very easy to do. So we're going to go full screen real quick so I can show you the draft board. And we are the pick. Let's find what pick we are.
There you are,
We're the 1.5 draft spot right here. David, how do you feel about that spot at the 1.5? I mean, I know we've talked about kind of who we would like at these middle spots of the first round, but what are you thinking about? Like, what are the most coveted draft spots for you right now?
So I found that I like to be maybe around draft position 10 or in like the top 3 or 4. We're kind of in that interesting middle where a lot of what we do is going to depend on what the people in front of us do here. Um, I've talked a little bit, and we've been putting together some rankings in our head, and I think that there's a couple of guys that could be available for us that I'd be thrilled to have. And if the draft goes the way that we think it would, or the way that most people have their rankings done, I think we're going to be at an odd spot, and we're really going to have to talk strategy here because I just don't love who always falls to us here. I think you end up reaching for a player that you could probably be happy to get 2 to 3 picks later at least. So you're going to go a little bit higher on somebody, I think, because some of these guys that are going to be sitting there, I just don't love them. I just got to be honest. There's just like 1 or 2 guys I'd love to have, maybe 3, and then otherwise I'd rather be in the back of the pack and get 2 picks back to back or close together.
Yeah, so David's saying, top 3 picks. Top 3 is his comfort zone, and that's where you'll get those picks. Oh my goodness, I thought Travis Kelce was going to fall to me at 5, was going to be my pick there. Now, this is tough for me because I honestly thought Kelsey was going to be right there, and I thought Hill would go ahead of me. I think I'm going to end up having to go with Tyreek Hill. I'm just not a fan right now of, again, I'm right there with you. Like, if I'm not the top, I would say 4. I'm okay with any of these 4: Jefferson, Chase, Kelsey, McCaffrey. And then once, if none of them are there at 5, I feel like I'm throwing darts a little bit. So I'm going to end up going with Tyreek Hill and hope for the massive upside here. Otherwise, I'm similar to you. Like, give me the back 2 or 3 spots of the draft, because that way you can, have the turnaround picks and you can put together some stacks that way as well, or focus on, getting some of the best offenses.
Yeah, that was interesting to see Kelsey go 3. I think it was a smart move on their part. Actually,
You
McCaffrey
just
falling to
mentioned that
4.
too, though, that if you're not comfortable with your spot, you have to reach, right? I mean, that
Yep.
literally just left your lips and it happened live. And it's something people need to get comfortable with.
Yeah, I think people kind of see what we were seeing there. Like, I don't love Cooper Kupp coming off his second ACL, right? At 30, 31 years old. His quarterback's been in shambles, his elbow shot. I mean, and that's the guy that was really going to fall to us, I think, was Cooper Kupp. And I just not real sold on there. So, the draft board dictated our move there, honestly. I think that's one of the instances where that happens, and you have to be flexible. You go in with a game plan, but be ready to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having multiple game plans is probably the goal here. So I have opened up the full draft room. I wanted to show you what the lobby and that you could draft from it, but here we are. We're in the full board room here. This is super cool. You can actually cycle through each team if you want to look at them, or this one, which David had alluded to earlier today. You click this square and there it is. Oh my gosh, it is so gorgeous. You can actually pop this screen out. And if you have, multiple monitors, you can slide this down to another monitor and have this running on another monitor as I drag it off screen, so that I can keep track of this while staring at this screen. So I could have both up. So I like to usually take that big board, I pop it out, and I have it up on one of my other monitors. And that way I can use this big board. I can still arrange my queue. I can star the players I want to target when the picks come back around to me. And I still have this draft board up that will show me kind of the game plan. And, focusing on, you all do this in your home leagues right now. You're trying to see, oh, your best buddy, he's a big, a Chiefs fan. You want to see, is he stacking up the Chiefs? Is he trying to build a Chiefs stack off the rip? There he is. He's getting Kelsey. He's going to go for Mahomes, probably grabbing some of these later, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore type picks for the Chiefs in the later rounds, So just focus on the big board, and I think you can kind of see the strategy. This guy right now went 1-2, RB1s right here. Grab 2 of them in his first 2 picks. So most likely you're not going to be too concerned about him getting a bunch of running backs. And if you were one of these 2 picks right next to him, you have to draft accordingly, understanding he's probably grabbing a wide receiver here on pick 34 as it comes back around, I would assume. So that, if you think at 33 you want a certain type of wide receiver and there's only so many left, you should probably reach for him right here, because most likely, or at least a higher probability, that he's gone right there. Now I'm going to close that out. My pick's coming up.
I think we're going to see a run on quarterback shortly, probably right after us, unless you start the run.
What do you think here?
Yeah, I don't think I love Olavi. I think it's probably a good spot to go with a quarterback, right?
I agree, man. It's like I don't want to reach here.
Take one of the stud quarterbacks, I would think, unless you go Andrews.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go Jalen Hurts. I just think the upside is absolutely epic here. So I went Jalen Hurts, a guy who I think he can run in a bunch of touchdowns as well. I think that team is absolutely loaded to the gills. I'm going to be taking Jalen Hurts here in a lot of drafts this year. And hopefully he stays healthy and I can just go absolutely bonkers. So, you can see a quarterback run has started at 2.7 with Josh Allen, the best quarterback in NFL history, has gone first. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes is the next 2 picks. I know a lot of people likely go Mahomes here over Hurts, and that's probably why his ADP is a spot higher. But here's the deal, my friends. There's a bit of strategy involved in how you guys are drafting these teams. So, take that DFS aspect that you have, that mindset, if you come from the DFS world, and understand that correlation aspect involved in your lineups, and have multiple strategies like David said. So when I'm grabbing Jalen Hurts here, there's 2 trains of thought. With the first thought with Patrick Mahomes, and I'm just speaking aloud here, you feel free to counter this, but with Patrick Mahomes, you basically are going to try to stack him the rest of the draft. with a guy like Jalen Hurts, I don't think you need to stack. I think if you can stack, it's fantastic. But he is somebody who carries enough value on his own because of his legs that you don't need to stack Jalen Hurts. So if I miss out on grabbing a Jalen Hurts pass catcher, I'm going to survive. I'm going to be fine. I can do some type of correlative stack in the rest of my lineup. If I grab DK Metcalf here and then
DK.
I go grab Geno Smith later in the draft to stack up with DK Metcalf, there's different ways that you can get correlation in your lineup without having to grab correlation with your very top picks. Now, DK Metcalf just went. Unfortunately, that was going to be my strategy there, was to grab him and just stack up Geno later, and that's going to be popular this year.
I don't hate Ridley. What tight end's available? Not a Mark Andrews fan there, huh? Tell me your thought behind that.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I worry about the Baltimore offense in general.
Okay.
I just do. I think Mark Andrews was a guy that absolutely popped off with a healthy Lamar Jackson. While he remained healthy, he was in and out of the lineup last year. Lamar Jackson getting hurt. We saw a third string quarterback at times, and there's no protection that doesn't happen again. And for me, for a guy who we have a season track record, and I know the talent is there, but we have a season of track record. I want the ascending pieces, and I think that Calvin Ridley in this Jacksonville offense could be ascending. I mean, we haven't seen him in a year and a half. He was a bona fide rising star out there in Atlanta. And now we're getting him with another guy who a lot of people are really liking this year. That's Trevor Lawrence. So, if Trevor Lawrence takes another step forward, which he took a massive step forward in season 2 that I think a lot of people did not entirely see after that season 1 showing, and that just goes to show you put some people around him that are talented, and, the cream rises to the top. And here we go. We've got Trevor Lawrence getting, Calvin Ridley. Yes, far removed from playing, but no, not lacking talent. So I'm going to try to get Trevor Lawrence in the middle rounds as well. And if that can be a stack that I'm able to put together, I'll be extremely happy with it. Geno would have been the ideal play. We got sniped there, missing out on DK by 2 picks, or 1 pick, I think. And then Geno all the way down there at pick 114 ADP would have been gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens. Like, there are so many times you'll be drafting and you see a guy that's falling to you, and he'll get right there and he'll get like a pick or 2 ahead of you, and then sure enough he gets taken because people know. I mean, people see what we see. They're looking for the same things we're looking for. Calvin Ridley too. I think you're absolutely right with everything you said. New offense, improved quarterback. I think that he's 2 years removed from football, which is kind of crazy to think about, but
It is crazy.
still only 28 years old. I mean, so, and I know we can't look too much into the the off-season gossip and stuff, but I mean, people are saying he looks great, and I agree that Trevor Lawrence took a huge step, especially towards the end of the year last year. So I think that was the right move there. You have to, the board dictates a lot of times what you do. So, and we already have a stud quarterback. We have 2 great receivers, hopefully stud receivers. So I think this is shaping up pretty well so far.
Yeah, and you can see some of these different strategies. Let's go ahead and talk about them. So the no wide receiver, or excuse me, the no running back strategy, you're seeing this person go ahead and just smash right now. Can you touch on that a little bit while I'm looking at this next pick for myself, and kind of tell us about the no running back thought for the early rounds?
Yeah, I think it's really popular this year, even over previous years. Um, it's just wide receiver feels like it dries up. I think that I saw some statistic that the top scores really come from the top, 10 to 20 wide receivers the majority of the time. So it's like you want to grab as many of those top 20, 25, 30 even wide receivers, because there just seems to be a fall off. And I'm not saying the fall off isn't there at running back, but I just think that it's such an unpredictable position. Running backs are always getting hurt. They're getting pounded all the time. They're getting 250 to 300 carries a season. It's just not as reliable. Wide receivers really, for the most part, don't get hurt as often. It seems like they don't miss as many games. They're not as banged up. They're playing more. And there are more guys, if you go and draft them early, that you can get that could pop off for 30-point weeks. Whereas the running backs that you'll get in that mid tier really don't seem to pop off for 30-point weeks very often. So I think it's a position that dries up quick. It gets uncomfortable. You have to start 3 of them instead of 2 of them. You have to start 3 running backs each week instead of 2 running backs. So there's always that little added piece to it too. I just think you're better off committing to either getting one of the top 3 to 5 running backs, and if you don't, that next pack isn't that far ahead of the next pack, if that makes sense. So if you're looking at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, I just think it's much closer between tier 2 and tier 3 in running backs than it is in wide receivers. So I think it's worth reaching and trying to get some stud wide receivers early, again, if that's what the draft dictates to you. So, it's a good strategy to go in with. Obviously, we picked up Keenan Allen there, so we have a couple of really good, reliable receivers. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think he's getting up there in age, and he's always had injury issues, but one of the best route runners in the league. Obviously, him and Herbert have worked together for a long time. They have that rapport. If he can stay healthy, I think he could really do well, but that's going to be a little bit of a question mark. And you can't.
Yeah, I mean, right now, look at my first 4 picks. I think there's going to be some concerns about missed time with potentially all 4. It's a volatile build for sure. I mean, Tyreek Hill, soft tissue injuries. Calvin Ridley hasn't played in 2 years. Keenan Allen, always seems to be nicked up. I will say this though, as for Keenan Allen, he is nicked up often, but he has not missed many games over the last couple of years. And I was looking at this last year. I was making, I did an article on him for betting and later in the season, and he was questionable for like the 7th straight week, but he continued to play. And I think I looked back and was like, barring take away like one season, like 3-4 years ago, he had played like 15 plus games in like 5 out of the last 6 years or something. But even that, I mean, you always think of Keenan Allen, you're like, yeah, he's injury prone. He's always hurt. And he's always banged up, but he's a baller, man. He goes out there, he plays to the pain, and he can produce for you. Now, one thing you and I talked about in our last phone call together is, we talked about things we learned through doing this. Last year, I did about 250 drafts. This isn't my first time ever doing best ball. It's my first one of the year. I've been very busy with sports betting, starting to get into the best ball moment. And I'm feeling it. And last year, learned a lot. Did a ton of drafts, lost a little bit of money by the end of the season. On my 250, probably lost about 20 entries worth of money. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough where I was like, man, I got to figure this out. And one thing, I went back and I looked at all the winning teams. And I'm going to do my pick, and then I'll keep talking.
Yeah.
This is where I get stuck. I think
Hawkinson got taken right before you. That's who I would have loved.
I know I got sniped again.
Yep. It'll happen all the time. Yeah,
Jeez,
that's a fall off. Yeah.
Getting ripped left and right. I think I'm just going with the Joe Mixon pick here. All right, so I'm not a big fan of going with running backs in these middle rounds. There's just the waters are so muddied, right? It's you're always worried about another running back there, workload, health issues, and that's why they fall back into this range of picks, like 50 to 70. And as David had mentioned, there's not much separation between tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. It's just they kind of there's like a little gray area between them all. There's no real actual separation where these players honestly have massive ceilings and incredibly low floors. Mixon is one of those guys. Now, last year, Samaje Perine was there. He's not there this year. He was somebody that took over 100 total touches last season in this backfield and also took 5 touchdowns away. I'm thinking this year we probably get another, 250-ish touches from Joe Mixon. If his health is there, then I'm not entirely sure how we would get any fewer than that. Last year, played 14 games, had 270 total touches. I think that's probably right around the range we'll get. And I'm okay with a guy who, again, is one of the best offenses, which is another thing I told you I think I messed up last year. I went with a lot of stacks and correlative stacks for teams that I really liked their stack upside, but I didn't really focus correctly on getting pieces from the best offenses. And as you can see right now, look at my teams. I mean, Miami, great offense. Philly, amazing offense. Jacksonville, I think will be an ascending offense. I think they showed last year that we're getting a lot better. Chargers, really good offense. Cincinnati, great offense. And I went out of my way to make sure that I'm going to try to draft as many players and get the most correlation I can on the best offenses in the NFL. And I'm not going to overthink it. That was my one huge takeaway from all the mistakes I did last year in all my drafts.
So I don't know if you saw it, but we did lose Trevor Lawrence there.
I saw that.
The guy that took him is kind of surprising that he took him because he already had a good quarterback, I think. Did Herbert get taken too? And we don't have a tight end. I don't hate Goddard. Go with the
No, I like
Goddard
Goddard
stack.
there a lot,
Yeah.
actually, and I hope he doesn't get taken. This guy needs a
Oh
tight end. Not sure if he would do
my.
that. I've got the stat correlation, and yeah, there it goes. I was actually
Woo.
thinking Marquise Brown there at 68 if he came to me as well, as we just got the news about DeAndre Hopkins being released. But I'm going to be looking at some of the Arizona wide receivers with really, really low ADPs here at some point down the road, so we can try to get some value. So I grabbed Dallas Goedert, and I think honestly, Dallas Goedert is the last tight end that you can kind of hang your hat on and feel comfortable with each and every week. Just one of those guys who, yeah, you know what, he might not pop off and be a top 3 tight end. He doesn't have the upside for it. I think a guy like Darren Waller does have the upside to be a top 3 tight end. We've seen it in the past. So there's your upside. I think Goddard's your floor, and I've stacked him with Jalen Hurts, a guy whom I mentioned in the beginning you don't need to stack. He has standalone value. So if Goddard was taken there, I wasn't going to be wrecked as far as my team construction is. I would have gone with another tight end later, probably, or drafted multiple of these guys in this range and just hope one of them each and every week scores a touchdown. And I go from there. And I would have gone with another wide receiver. But I'm okay with getting the floor stack. I think what I did here, too, is I grabbed a bunch of red zone touchdowns. Jalen Hurts can run them in. Dallas Goedert can catch them in the red zone. If Philly goes off for 30-plus points per game this year, scoring 30, 32 points per game, these guys are going to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that was the right play at that time, looking at the rest of the board, trying to see what's out there, seeing also what we need. Yeah, I think that was the right play.
And you can see after the first couple rounds, the drafts usually speed up, and as people are starting to see how their strategies are unfolding, you can see, this guy went 3 heavy running backs. Now he's probably going to be going a bunch of wide receivers in a row and then grabbing a couple quarterbacks in this 100 ADP range, as there's a bunch of good quarterbacks in this range with, really solid high end QB2 or low end QB1 if everything goes well type upside. So I do like that aspect. If there wasn't a QB run here and I had, high aspirations for this Philly offense, I probably would not have drafted Allen or Mahomes here. I really, really think Hurts is just the real deal MVP type season this year. So I wanted Hurts there in my first draft. Again, just want players from the best offenses. Let me go ahead and grab my next pick.
Yeah, so what I would do here is looking at what we need, I would just select running backs and wide receivers only just to clear up our board a little bit, because I think that's really where
There
we
we
need to
go.
go. Yeah, and I would just go right down this list and try to find the player we think is great. I mean, you have Pacheco sitting right there at the top in a great offense this year. I also think Gabe Davis is a little undervalued, and I think I say that every year, and then he somehow
Yeah.
lets me down. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think that Pacheco's the right pick here, but I don't hate Gabe there either. I don't know about Traylon Burks. I mean, who's going to be quarterback there? Is it Tannehill? Is it Will Levis? I don't know what's going to happen there. So I think that is not someone I'm super confident in there. Cam Akers, meh. Gabe Davis. I think we got out of the top. There was 4 or 5 people at the top of the board there, and obviously Pacheco was at the top. I think everybody after us gets a much lesser player there. So I'm actually happy with that spot for us.
I'm with you. And he kind of falls in line with, remember, my draft strategy. It's get the players from the best offenses and don't overthink it. Just, hey, you're running back for the potentially the best team in the NFL, one of the best 2 or 3 teams in the NFL. Let me go ahead and just take you. Do I actually think Cam Akers has higher upside? I do. I personally think that Cam Akers has higher upside, but I didn't want to overthink it. I think Stafford and that offense potentially trending downwards due to Stafford just aging. He's just an aging veteran quarterback, and I think he had trouble pushing the ball down the field, and that offense could struggle again this year. And I don't want to be picking players from lesser offenses if I can grab primary pieces from elite offenses. And I think that, maybe the Chargers are a fringe elite offense. Maybe that wasn't the best one, and I'm not going to be a perfect drafter in my first one. But, that I just don't want to get cute. I just don't want to get cute. The other options in that range would have been reaches, in my opinion, as well. Hawkinson, maybe J.K. Dobbins would have been 2 solid picks there. But I ended up getting 2 guys that I think are very similar, Joe Mixon and Dallas Goedert. I mean, that's apples to oranges. Comparing these players on different teams. But I think when we're talking upside, they're very similar upside and floors together. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this. My approach this draft, again, I've mentioned it 3 times now, just getting those best offensive plays. So you've seen this board fill up here, and you're starting to see the way people are starting to, put together their rosters. And again, we mentioned this one. He did a 0 RB start, and that's the goal. You grab a bunch of, high upside wide receivers, and you need 4 of them to show up each week, right? 3 starters, and then your 4th could be the flex in your lineup, that one flex position. And now he's slamming home all these mid-round running backs, hoping he gets 2 of them weekly that pop off. I think I'm a little light right now on wide receiver. We've got the 1 QB, 2 RB, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end build. We got to start hammering some wide receivers here. We'll get some late running backs in the draft. Another quarterback in maybe 4 or 5 rounds. There should be a handful here. Goff, Geno, Rodgers at the 110 to 120. So let's focus on wide receiver, David, and see what we can make happen.
Yeah, quarterback doesn't seem to dry up. I think you can be confident picking a quarterback quite late in the draft and getting somebody that is the equal caliber of somebody in those mid rounds. So, who do you like here? I mean,
This is really tough.
Yeah, it
This is
is.
really tough.
More?
Really like the upside of Elijah Moore this year.
You got to pick him.
So I put him in my queue. That auto drafts him. I don't know if they're going to be a top offense. I do believe in Elijah Moore's talent, and I think that Deshaun Watson is going to remind people why he used to be a high-end QB1. And I know he had his legal battles and then came back and played terrible football for 6 games last year. But man, get him behind that offensive line, which, is literally one of the top 3 or 4 offensive lines in the NFL. And, maybe Elijah Moore, opposite of Amari Cooper, maybe there's some upside there. Maybe as a wide receiver 2 at pick 92, I end up getting our wide receiver 1 upside week to week, even though I got him at, a wide receiver 2 value. Would you have done anything different there at that pick?
No, I think that we were looking at this. We were looking at those wide receivers, and I don't think one necessarily stood out to the other. I think your justification for that pick is great. Cortland Sutton, I don't know how to feel. Michael Thomas, that's a guy that's been battling injuries the last few years, and he just seems like he's not there. It seems like he doesn't have the headspace right now for it either, which is another battle. I'm seeing some love for like Juju in New England being the wide receiver 1 there. I don't hate that. If that comes back to us where we're at now, I mean, these middle rounds just get muddy. They get a little bit ugly. I'll be honest with you. You're starting to get into the rounds where you're taking guys that you're not super confident in, I think. And that's the part of this is the part of the draft that I think I'm still the most uncomfortable is I don't love, in the beginning you get a guy you're like, "Oh yeah, I got such and such." And you're excited about it. Right now it's like milk toast, Doesn't lukewarm.
Yeah,
I'm lukewarm
well,
about
come
all these
back around
people.
to me here. I'm kind of thinking about grabbing a 3rd running back. I know it seems kind of early for that, but when I'm comparing these types of players,
What wide receivers are available? Yeah. You got. I don't know. You're gonna have to just
I think I'm just
snag
going to
one.
go Schuster here.
Yeah.
Felt myself pressed up against the clock. Probably talked when I wasn't supposed to talk, to analyze this draft live. But honestly, Juju Smith-Schuster, I mean, you nailed it. Potential wide receiver
Yeah.
1 out there for New England. Not a top offense, potentially not even the top option in
Not
that
even in the
offense. I
least bit.
think it's one of those offenses that could really just spread the ball around. But I digress. I went with a guy who, honestly, I felt pressured to take because we just spoke about him and it's live,
And
So here
listen,
we are.
that'll happen. Honestly, like that's gonna
Mhm.
happen. When you're sitting there drafting, you are gonna look at the board and 30 seconds goes quickly and these rounds because you're not happy about anybody really. There's
Yeah.
not gonna be a guy most of the time that is standing out above all the rest at in these later rounds. They're all gonna be like, you know, when you think about them in your head, they're all going to be within a couple of points each week. Nobody's going to pop off more than likely. I like the Juju pick there. Again, not a top offense, maybe not even a good quarterback, let's say. I don't even know if his own coach likes their quarterback, but I think that he is the top pick in that offense. So I don't hate getting that in the later rounds. Now, if that turns out to be wrong, like you said, you're picking from Odell Beckham, who I love OBJ back in the day, but he's a shell. Alan Lazard, which actually was probably the best one up there, I think, and he just got taken. So, I mean, Jacoby Myers, that's the guy that left New England, right? And went to
Uh-huh.
Las Vegas.
Yep.
So, I mean, he's the second wide receiver in that offense, clearly. And you get worse coverage, but he's still the second guy out there. He's going to get far fewer looks than Juju. I don't hate the Juju pick there.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those. I think this is honestly, this is where the drafts are won, right? I mean, everybody can kind of look through the first 5 rounds or so, and they're going to throw a dart and land on a decent player.
Yeah.
This is kind of the area where the pressure builds, and you're going to see it live. While I am, not focusing entirely on what my next pick should be, and I'm focusing on what I should be saying and showing you guys the correct place to click and the draft board. And while I've got the draft board up, I'm not able to see everything I've got going on in the draft itself, and I'll miss my picks and my opportunity. And that's fine. I'm here to make some decent content, give you guys, a good intro to what Underdog Fantasy is and the experience is like. But the
So
pressure you'll see mount on the picks as the time goes. And that's what makes it fun. I mean, this is literally the best parts about drafting with your friends is the draft. It's the pressure. It's the experience. And you get all that and you can have it in 1 hour of 30 seconds per pick. Drafting and be done with it. And you get that experience. And guess what? You loved it so much, you can do it again and again and again. Or you could have a bunch of 8-hour drafts running simultaneously. Last year, I had 20, 30 drafts at a time running. I would have about 10 to 15 picks per day I would have to make. I'd have 8 hours to make them. So it was great for my dad life, for my work life. I could see, 3 alerts on my cell phone that said, you have a pick coming up or you're live, you have 7 hours and 56 minutes remaining. And oh, okay, cool. During lunch, I'm going to go make those other 3 picks. And I did that. And I would have like 15 to 20 drafts at all times all summer. And that's how I did 250 total, as I just had the ongoing running drafts. All right. So let's go ahead and, I've got some of these teams here. I don't necessarily have an opportunity to stack. I'm kind of looking at my QB2 here, and I'm not terribly worried about, stacking up another offense because I just feel like these positions, these players, I'm not getting anybody I necessarily want. So I'm going to end up going Geno here, and I'm hoping that I've got some weeks where we saw some Jalen Hurts down weeks, and if I have some of those volatile, maybe 3-4 weeks per year where he's down, maybe Geno with those 3 massively high upside wide receivers who he now does have, hopefully running out 3 wide receiver sets and an ascending Seattle Seahawks offense with a really good offensive line and some good running backs. I mean, literally, what is the hole in their offense? I'm not entirely sure they have one. Maybe Geno and his floor and ceiling are both lifted this year because of all the talent around him. And I give myself potentially a high upside QB2 and a low end QB1 who can fill in when Jalen is on a bye week and when Jalen potentially has some down weeks. And one thing that you had alluded to in the beginning that I have not even looked at for today's draft is the playoff schedule. I don't know what Geno Smith has in weeks 15, 16, 17. But if Jalen has some second game against the division type opponents where historically second game in the division lower scoring, and this is just a fact, that's not even a subjective take. This is division games, second game of the year, usually lower scoring. Maybe Jalen has a handful of those. Maybe Geno Smith has a couple, patty cake matchups during the playoffs, and then I get that upside I was hoping for. So should have looked at it beforehand, but again, here I am doing it live, making mistakes.
there's a lot you could think about. I mean, you have to go in with a couple of game plans. You can't stick to every game plan that's out there. You're not going to be able to combine every perfect strategy out there into one perfect draft. I mean, if you do, we'd love to see it, but it's not going to be perfect. You have to focus on a couple of things, and I think you did that. Interestingly enough, I was looking at it when you were talking in Week 15. The Eagles play the Seahawks, so a chance for a blow up game there with your quarterback. So I mean, ideally, Geno blows up and Dallas Goedert catches 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, really in that scenario, that's what you're looking for. But like you said, you can't look at everything. It's something to consider, but it's not the end all be all. You brought up the fact that Geno has 3 incredible weapons, and he does. Honestly, the only thing holding Geno back at this point might be Geno himself. But the other thing I was going to touch on while you focus on the draft was when we were looking at our team construction, our roster construction there. I think something that could be helpful to a first time drafter would be in that scenario. I think you were pretty set on like, I don't need a wide receiver here yet. I might not even really focus on wide receiver. If you really feel that way, what you could do is just select a couple other positions only, like we've shown you before, and just look at the board like that. Sometimes I think, eliminating some of the noise there could really help focus your attention on getting the best player you want at the position you're looking for. And it's really a good way to fill the need. Like if you really feel like, okay, I'm done with quarterback, I don't need another quarterback, Don't even look at quarterbacks. Just select running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It just makes the board a little bit cleaner. And again, if this is one of your first drafts, or you're getting your feet wet in this, and you're not super experienced in that, just little things like that could help.
Yeah, and I'm going to start taking some pieces that I think, could ascend this season if, X, Y, and Z happens. Someone like Alec Pierce, maybe that offense takes a step forward this year, and maybe he gets, some wide receiver 1 and 2 opportunities due to injuries, whatever it might be. So I'm grabbing a piece of Pierce. Michael Gallup, potentially will have some wide receiver 1 upside this season. To any given week, honestly, could produce that type of value. Zay Jones, who we saw do that last year a few times, started scoring some touchdowns a few of these weeks, got a ton of targets. I believe former second round or late first round pick for the Bills years ago.
Yep.
Just these are the types of guys I'm going to be targeting now. Not entirely concerned about floor at this point. It's just all upside. Give me all the upside I can. Give me guys that have opportunity if injuries arise or the talent is there and they're buried on the depth chart. Those are the types of players I'm targeting. It's just a very gray area. You can literally pick anybody on the board and say a few positive and a few negative things about it at this point. And this is where, you've got to be really strong in your conviction with what you feel and think about certain players this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I just saw Rashee Rice get taken. That's purely a pick based on the offense he's going into. I mean,
Yes.
and it's exactly what you said. He's going into one of the, if not the best offense in the NFL, and people are hoping just to get a piece of that. And that's what we've talked about before. Love the Pierce pick, even though it's a homer pick as well. I just really do
I did
think
it for
that their
you.
offense, yeah, thanks. I really think their offense actually takes a step. I think that, how could it not? I mean, they had shells at quarterback last year. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it takes at least a big leap, and I think Pierce is a freak who could really benefit from that. I mean, the guy runs like a 4.4. He's like 6'3", I think, can jump out of the building. So yeah, I think that's a great option. Zay Jones, another great offense, like you said. And again, you're not gonna pick a guy that you're like, oh yeah, this guy is gonna blow it up every single week here. You're just trying to you're trying to find like that needle in the haystack. You're trying to find the guy that gets a good opportunity. You're trying to find the guy that has that ceiling, but his floor might be pretty bad at times. So I think that I think that, like Mitch said, that the drafts are lost and won in this area in these rounds, but you're not going to necessarily know going into the season whether or not you've killed it or not. Only time will really tell.
Yeah, this is tough here for running backs too. I keep thinking I want to grab like a 4th running back, but man, is it tough to find one that I'm like, yes, that's the
Yep.
one. That's the high upside play. But he's got guys down here like Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Gainwell, guys that we've seen that have produced in the past. Devin Singletary, but they're going to be buried. They're buried in depth charts, or the opportunity might not be there. So it's a really tough spot to try to get these end of the bench type running backs and hope that you get some upside. And the good
Yeah.
thing is I don't need to reach yet, right? It's at pick 140. I'll probably grab one of them when it comes back around.
Mitch, how do you feel about handcuffs in best ball? I'm curious to know your thought because I saw that the Cincinnati guy that they drafted, Chase Brown, I think was down there, and I think he's the clear number 2 now in that offense. So we obviously have Mixon. Would you not reaching, but would you recommend going for handcuffs in best ball, or is it essentially a waste because if Mixon stays healthy all year, that guy's never going to pop off?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think we draft with best case scenario
Okay.
with every pick. If I'm drafting these mid round guys, our best case scenario is, Colts offense takes a step forward. Pierce gets a bunch of games as the wide receiver 2, maybe some games as what are wide receiver 1. Up and down the roster, Jamal Williams maybe is the red zone benefactor like he usually is. Maybe the Chiefs run the ball more this year. Literally look at every single pick and think, what's the best possible outcome, and you draft it as such. And I think if you do that, you're thinking Joe Mixon has a career year, gets 300 touches, stays healthy, every single game. and this offense is the top 3 offense. And if that happens, then you've wasted a pick on handcuffing them later. And that pick later could have been on a guy where you paint that scenario like Devin Singletary, being on an offense that isn't Buffalo, where, Josh Allen's taking all the red zone touchdowns, or, Devin Knox is catching 8 red zone touchdowns. And a guy like Singletary, maybe he can score, 10 this year. Maybe he ascends in this backfield due to injury. And you have to draft like that. Like, hey, I believe in Singletary's talent, and I think his upside is high-end RB2 if everything works for him. And if I waste a pick handcuffing Joe Mixon later, I miss out on the opportunity of having potentially Joe Mixon in a perfect scenario and Devin Singletary in a perfect scenario. And then I have 2 running backs each and every week that can be thrust into my RB1 and RB2 spots.
Yep.
That's a great question.
No, I like
Speaking
that.
of, I'm going to go with the former Buffalo Bill, Devin Singletary. And I know this backfield is an absolute disaster. And, it is what it is. I'm a little concerned he's not there when it comes back around. This is kind of the area where you start to see all these running backs just start to go. I mean, everybody drafts heavy wide receiver to start the draft for the most part. And then you see a lot of these running backs. You'll start to see a lot more green going here, rounds 12 through 16, so on and so forth. And then down here, you'll get a bunch of tight ends and some low end wide receivers. But you're going to see a lot of green in this area here. So not entirely sure that it's the greatest pick, but again, you got to stand true to your convictions and how you feel about the draft, and just stick by your guns and go.
Yeah, absolutely. I could tell when you were going to click your mouse that your pointer finger really was like seizing up a little bit. I think I saw it from here, because you're not going to feel good about all these picks. But I think that was a sound pick there, and I'm interested to see that I don't know what his talent level is. I'm just curious to see in a new offense. I think you'll really get an idea of if this guy's going to make it or not. But yeah, I think it was totally justifiable. We had a little tight end run there too. A couple of quarterbacks went around us. Yeah, I mean, at this point, everybody's kind of just filling needs and hoping that they catch the guy that blows up. That gets a good opportunity for whatever reason, or kills it in camp or something.
Yeah. I got a question for you as I'm sitting here. Probably should have covered this earlier. Totally forgot. Guys like Jameson Williams or anybody else who starts on the pup list, things like that, where they're going to miss a portion of the season, or even a player that like Elijah Mitchell. He's going to give you some RB1 weeks, and then he's going to be, hurt, right? I'm not saying Elijah Mitchell because I know he's behind CMC, but I'm talking talent-wise, right? There are some guys in the NFL, hey, they're not going to give me a full season, but when they're out there, they're going to give me great value. How do you feel about guys like that in this format?
I think it's very individual. Like, I'm really high on, so to use your example, Jameson Williams. I think the guy has immense talent in a pretty good offense. I think the opportunity is there for him to do really, really well when he gets back. I know he didn't have a lot of playing time last year, so if we're just talking about him specifically, it's kind of he's kind of an anomaly, I think. But overall, I think you have to look at, well, what kind of production are you going to get, and when are you going to get it? I mean, if he's if he misses the first 6 weeks of the season, like Jameson or somebody else, I think that you can draft him confidently knowing that you're going to get him when you really need him, which is important. If it's an injury prone guy that you just know he's going to miss games, but you don't know where they're going to come from, I think that's slightly different. And I think you just have to see if you feel that the player is going to be worth the ADP of when you're going to have to get him. Like Jameson Williams, I mean, he's missing half the season. And what did he go in round 7 or 8 or something, or maybe 10? I don't know. He went pretty high though for a guy that's missing half the season guaranteed.
Yeah, he went in the
And
8th round, the back end pick.
and he had an injury in college. That's why I think he was drafted late, if I remember. He came out last year and barely played. He came out his first game, caught a 40-yard touchdown. Then I don't think he did too much else. So I mean, you're really drafting a guy like that on pure talent and upside, and like hoping that he's great. But in round 8, I don't know if I would have felt super confident doing that, because he's not even the best wide receiver on his team either. So it's tough. It really is. You have to have a conviction about the player. I think you need to decide what your projections are for that player, or what you think they're going to give you in the time that they are there. And if you think they're going to be a stud, then you just draft them and live with your decision, honestly.
Yeah, it's a good take. I think I fall with a similar viewpoint of these types of players. I had actually gotten burned dramatically about it, and I'll tell you in a hot second. So I was looking at this draft board, and the best part about it is I could see, there's a couple guys behind me that have either one tight end or this guy has zero. So I know he's going to start hammering home tight ends here, probably potentially his next two picks. So I put two guys in my queue, wanted to make sure I got at least one of them come back around as my second tight end. Neither of them have the same bye week as Dallas Goedert. I'm going to try to get a third tight end at the end as well. It's just a position I like to try to grab three on because they're just so darn volatile. And my other guys, I always want guys who have either a role in a top offense or they're like a big red zone target. Now, a guy like Dawson Knox, we know is a great red zone option. Yes, I know that Kincaid there is out there in Buffalo, but I'm not a big believer in rookie tight ends. And I want a guy who I think, maybe Knox last year, didn't give you the season you thought you'd get coming off the back of the 2021 year he had. He basically just did the same thing over again. But I'd be happy if he did it again this year at pick 170 or whatever I had him at, pick 164. Or when it comes back around to me, it'd be pick 176. I'd be totally happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we talked about that a couple of times already, and this is something that's interesting too. A lot of guys get a ton of hype coming out of the draft, and most of it's warranted, but you just don't know. And like you said, tight ends especially. Gronkowski, I think, put together the best tight end season in history, and that's Gronkowski. So like, you can't expect that. Kyle Pitts, one of the most highly touted tight ends,
Right.
freak athlete, comes out and has had one good season maybe, and then hasn't been able to repeat it. And even as a rookie, like, I don't think Kincaid's that yet. So you're talking about like these one of one unicorn people that if Kincaid's not that, okay, well, what is a rookie tight end? What's realistic for a rookie tight end? And Knox has a great relationship with Josh Allen. They have great chemistry. And like you said, he's a great red zone target. So even if Kincaid's moving the ball up and down the field a little bit and then Knox comes in at all the goal line, like, you don't lose that much. And what is it, 6 rounds later or something, you can draft Knox and you're still getting that Buffalo offense. So yeah, I think exactly what you said is a great point,
Yeah,
Joe.
and you're seeing the tight ends, people are starting to pick them up here. You're seeing a
Yep.
lot more green, as I had mentioned. A lot of people are grabbing these kind of mid-round running backs or late-round running backs, I should say. It's a tough pick here. I mean, they're all hard at this point. I'm just kind of filling out my roster a bit. Probably going to go wide receiver here. I was thinking Curtis Samuel earlier. I know he never is going to have a clear path to playing time, but I'm just a fan of his potential upside. I know they tried to give him so many different ways to get the ball last year, which I thought was something that I could latch onto for this draft pick and say, hey, if they try to give him the ball out of the backfield a few times per game, or get him those those little bubble screens to try to make him give him some space on the outside to make a play, whatever it might be, they tried to give him the ball, which means they value him as a playmaker. And listen, at pick 173, that's what I'm looking for. People
That's
that
all
can
you
make
can.
plays on their own. They're not entirely dependent on their quarterback doing it for them or the offense being great. They're just good players.
Yeah, and at this point, like you said, like, that's all you can hang your hat on. Like, you got to
Yeah.
find a reason to pick him. But I think I was going to say the same thing, and you beat me to it. It shows that the offense likes him. They have confidence in his abilities. They think he could pop one of those off at any time. So I think that that's never a bad thing. That's a great sign that they just want the ball in his hands. Look at people taking like Zeke Elliott without a team. Even, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Zeke? How do you feel about even Hopkins to some extent? I mean, he's not exactly a spring chicken as wide receivers go. Still DeAndre Hopkins, but production hasn't been, I don't think, quite as high the last few years, mostly due to injury, I think, and then inconsistent quarterback play at times. But he doesn't even have a team right now. So, like, how do you draft a person, or how would you give him some kind of ranking, not knowing where he's going to fall if you're drafting this time before he gets scooped up?
Yeah, that's extremely difficult to
Yeah,
identify kind of the value of those types of players, in my opinion. For me, I basically just am not going to touch them. I don't have too much interest in either. I'd rather just take uh, a flyer on a guy who I already know what his potential role could be, and a guy like both those guys with no team, you don't even know what their potential roles could be. I mean, you
right.
literally have no clue what their potential roles could be. They
Yeah.
might not even latch onto a team till midway through the season. I'm not wasting picks on guys like that. If it burns me, so be it. It burns me, right? But I'm just not. I'm not comfortable doing it. Man, I had all the intention in the world here to draft Mac Jones to stack with Juju Smith-Schuster, hoping, yeah, maybe Mac Jones, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest, I was thinking about it. Screw the correlation aspect. I'm going pure upside here. I think I'm going Brock Purdy when it comes back around. Um, man, listen, they love this kid. They absolutely love him. And I know the entire world still wants Trey Lance to be the QB1 out there. Honestly, he looks so freaking good in that offense, being thrust into that role. And I'm thinking back end quarterbacks. Am I reaching maybe a little bit? Yeah, I don't care. I'm at this point, I'm grabbing guys. You just saw Trey Lance go right before someone thinking similarly. At this point, we're just grabbing players that we think could literally win us millions of dollars. What if Brock Purdy ends up being, and maybe this isn't the type of draft, and I will say that, because I took Hurts so early and I basically have a bona fide QB1, if not the QB1, maybe this isn't the type of draft to take Purdy. And maybe the type of draft where you take Purdy is if you wait until round 10 to take your first quarterback. And when round 10 comes around, you start grabbing, these types of players, right? Geno, and then it comes back around to you later and you grab Kyler, and then you grab Brock Purdy later. Maybe that's the type of draft that Brock Purdy better is served for. But again, who's to say this isn't also the type of draft? We don't know. We don't know. And I think that the rotisserie, the QB depth approach of just grabbing multiple starters where you need one of these guys to turn into a QB1, but none of them are drafted as QB1. That's the type of draft that probably Brock Purdy's better suited for. But shoot, I don't care. I took him anyways. If Brock Purdy ascends and is healthy in that offense, man, that offense is so dangerous
Yeah.
on multiple levels, up and down the field, on the inside, on the outside. They've got great running back depth, right? So if even CMC goes down, they have multiple players that can run the football behind him. I just think that's a really, really deep offense. Ayuk on the outside with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. It's a really good offense. And listen, if Purdy ascends there and I get some QB1 weeks, I'll be incredibly happy. And also, I guess to some extent, protects me if anybody goes down.
Yeah, and I also don't hate that their defense is so good. They're going to get them the ball back a lot. They're going to get them the ball back maybe in good field position. So, yeah, I don't hate that. I would probably agree with you with what you said about how there are some drafts that it dictates more. Like we're hoping, like you said, best case scenario, Jalen Hurts has an MVP season and none of our other guys see the field, but it doesn't hurt there. I mean, there wasn't a great pick on the board necessarily. We don't have any glaring needs. So as long as you can sleep at night. I thought, going back to something we were talking about, DeAndre Hopkins, I didn't know if there was any ill will after what he did to Buffalo that one game, jumping over
Listen,
the entire team.
I want him to join the Bills. That's how I feel about him.
Be a
So
great
I mean,
fit.
I'm fine with it. I'll take all my my Bills fandom, put it aside, and let's just get more talent around Josh Allen and give Stephon Diggs some breathing room because you saw even towards the second half of the season, man, teams were literally just bracketing him like they do Tyreek Hill, and he doesn't have that explosive speed like Tyreek to still produce the way Tyreek can, even when he is double coveraged. And I think Stephon Diggs, as great as a route runner he is, top 3 to 5 in the NFL. That bracket coverage was difficult for that offense, and you saw it stumble in the second half of the season. So
that'd be a great pick for them to pick up.
Yeah, they need some help. They need some help, and if it's not him, I understand the pick on Kincaid with, the goal of just being able to maybe not allow teams to have bracket coverage when you've got a guy that can attack the seam like Kincaid can. In which case, then safeties have to float around the middle of the field more than just staying over the top of where Diggs is. And that's the theory behind it. But man, those rookie tight ends, we already both talked about it. They just don't produce the way you always want them to. And maybe he can be different. Maybe because he's not coming in to have to be the primary target. Maybe he gets to just come in and just be a talent because there are other targets and stars on that team where that pressure is not on him. I don't know. But man, give me Hopkins. I mean, what team doesn't want a veteran wide receiver, potentially headed towards the Hall of Fame if his career goes well here at the end of his career? Give me D-Hop all day, baby.
Yeah, I think he's 100% in the Hall of Fame. I mean, the guy has glue for hands, so I think that would be great for the Bills to pick him up. And I mean, like you said, like touching I mean, it's not exactly fantasy output, but Kincaid pick makes a lot of sense for their offense. Just the flow of it, like you said, to take some focus away from Diggs, put somebody in the middle that can catch the ball. That at least people have to respect him, because if he catches it, I mean, the dude's an athlete. So maybe Knox isn't going to take that up the seam all the way for a touchdown, but Kincaid could. So
Check that photo out.
that. Did you do that? Is that you?
Yeah, I had the staff make one up yesterday.
He looks like a superhero. You were like,
Yeah, he
draw
does.
DeAndre Hopkins looking like Superman with dreads coming out of his helmet, and I want the background to look like he's moving at 150 miles an hour.
Yes. Yes, yeah. Everybody in the background needs to be a blur, and there needs to be pyrotechnics involved.
Right, yeah, flames shooting out from behind him as he runs. I want his hair to have fire on the tips. That's what you said. That's the message you sent, probably.
Yeah.
That's so
So
funny.
this, if you're looking at, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Listen, we got tons of articles here, my friends. I mean, you can go to the Best Ball homepage. I'm going to link it down below in the description section. It'll also be in the comment section. There are probably 20 to 25 Best Ball articles already that you can, just go through, read them at your leisure. They're scrolling through here. You can go to the articles tab and just read. It shows one pick away up here in the corner. I also am putting this in the just so you know, it's not like some scamming link. It's a landing page for an email. We're going to do a free fantasy football and best ball draft kit this year. So you grab this down below, and you guys can select. Let me go ahead and make my last selection, and I'll finish that thought. So it's my last pick, man. My absolute last pick. I like my depth everywhere. Probably just going to throw a dart here at tight end. Honestly, I have no personal take here of like who could ascend. Do you have anyone you just want to throw a dart at?
I think you should take Jelani Woods. Little bit of a homer pick. Also, looking at that board, either him or Ferguson, I guess. So if you really wanted to look at that board, those are the
I
two
was thinking
guys I'd
Jake.
be looking at. Yeah, those would be the
Yeah.
two guys. But I don't think you're going to win or lose. Jelani Woods is a freak.
And
I
he's
don't know
got a
how.
freak at quarterback for him now.
Freak at quarterback. Bunch of freaks on the team. Can't go wrong, right?
Hey, I
like
talked
this
about
upside.
grabbing all the best pieces for the best offenses, and here I am with Alec Pierce and Jelani Woods. Oops.
No, let's just hope. Listen, let's just hope and pray.
You can see the back end. I mean, who are you picking here? It's all hold on. Let me finish that other thought. Mailer light. So this is just a quick landing page. You guys can grab your free draft kit. Totally free. Again, David and I, we're just here to have some fun, man. We're brother-in-laws. We love each other. We love fantasy football. We're totally into the best ball scene. We love reading it all around the industry, and we're like, you know what? Let's freaking do this, right? Let's do this together. Let's put together a draft kit for people. Let's have some fun. We want to go on this journey with you. I'm going to draft another 250, probably total of 500 in 2 years. David, I know, is going to be in the hundreds. I can already tell he's dozens in, and it's only May. He's got 3 months left. He's dozens of drafts into it. So you're going to get some decent experience out of it. And listen, you're not paying for it. It's free, so if you want to learn a bunch of best ball stuff along the way, at the very least, we're going to give you what the industry insights are, and we're going to give our spin on them, and we're going to share our experiences, and we're going to give you our rankings, and you're going to have, honestly, by the time the season starts, close to probably 200 or so articles you'll be able to read. I mean, you'll have everything you want to keep tabs on. We're going to send special newsletters to anybody who signs up in this too. That will literally just be like, hey, here's an article about the DeAndre Hopkins fallout. And it's like, we're going to just blast that to your email. So you can just read it there. You don't have to go searching in the internet for it. You don't even have to go to the website if you don't want to read it all the time. We're going to give you a lot of info in your email. Grab that link down below. You plop your email in there, hit subscribe. Once you subscribe, it'll give you a nice little message after you do it. Just says thank you. And that's it. I mean, just watch me do it live, drop my email in there, and bang, you've got yourself a free draft kit that will be emailed to you. And we will send out articles for you as well. And you can always unsubscribe if you're just not into reading all the time and don't want the articles. They're not going to be every day. Don't you worry about it. You're not going to get spammed. We're going to make sure you're just taken care of as the best ball journey and experience goes together. Final draft board. Let's take a quick peek at it, David. You could see, color coordinated, pretty cool. Shows you, hey, this guy went super heavy wide receivers, 5 of the first 6, and then started hammering, running backs and tight ends at the end of the draft, so on and so forth. Wow.
How many
that guy
running backs
messed
did
up. He's got 2 running backs.
Oh boy.
That's a mistake. And you're going to see some teams like that. I mean, the pressure, you saw
Deuce
it get to
one.
me. I don't remember what couple picks it was, but I got stumped. I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And I just kind of slammed home one player and hoped for the best. It's going to catch people off guard. The clock's going to catch up on them. They're not going to track it correctly sometimes, and they're going to make mistakes. You're going to see some people step away in auto draft. You've got an opportunity here to make some money if you can do a really good job focusing and being prepared. And the more you do, I mean, the better you get.
There is a lot of pressure on Deuce Vaughn in that lineup. A lot of
Yeah,
pressure riding on Deuce Vaughn.
yeah,
On his
right.
Cvet's shoulders. That's a lot of
What do
pressure.
you mean, dude? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
dude,
that's a
DeAndre Swift and Deuce Vaughn. It would go through these teams. I mean, there's just you're going to see all sorts of different approaches. This team has 5 running backs in a row
wow.
in these late rounds. Had 3 more here, another one here, 9 RBs. One thing I want to tell y'all is just make sure when you're doing your drafts, keep in mind the totals that you have for each position, as well as the construction of what your lineup can be each and every week. It's 1 starting quarterback, it's 2 starting running backs, it's 3 starting wide receivers, 1 starting tight end, and then a flex, which a lot of people often hope is their 4th wide receiver, which is why you'll see 7, 8 wide receivers be drafted each and every week, hoping that 4 of them pop off. Today was a good experience. I enjoyed it. I hope you watched the whole video. I'm not going to edit much out. I'm going to just let this rip, and hopefully you guys can enjoy, an hour or so of a draft. And if it's your first time you've ever watched anything for best ball, I think it's a good one for you to just kind of get your feet wet, give it a try in your own time. And make sure you drop your email down below in the newsletter link. Make sure you visit the teamreservoir.com best ball site, and you guys will get a bunch of free information. Arm yourself with knowledge, prepare yourself with experience as you go through your best ball summer. We'll be going through it together each and every week right here on this YouTube channel. So hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and we would love if you could just let David and I know, how did we do together on our very first podcast? Leave us a comment down below in the comment section. We'll read that and probably have a laugh together with our coffee, make fun of each other a little bit, and we'll have a good time. So thanks a lot for tuning in today, David. If you want to sign off, go for it, my man.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
All right, take care, everybody.